everybody, Dan Illman, Mike Beer, the DRF race of the day for Saturday, November the 5th, race number 11 at Keeneland. It's the Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Classic. $6 million is the purse. We're going a mile and a quarter. Our coverage is presented by DRF Bets. Let's take a look at this field. Please scan the QR code for race of the day access on your mobile devices. This race is about Flightline. He is the ace of the division. He is the ace of the industry, and he's a 1 in 100 talent.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty strong Breeders' Cup Classic, Dan. So it's saying something that Flightline is 3-5 on the morning line. This is, in my opinion, very clearly the toughest field that Flightline has faced to date. But he's been so good, it's hard to have a lot of confidence in anyone else.
I'm curious as to your opinion of this Timeform US pace projector. We know Life is Good is wickedly fast. He draws inside Flightline. He has to go. Flightline is quick. He has sat from off the pace, but he does like to get involved in the early portion of this race. Do you see a fast-paced duel setting up things for maybe a late runner or a stalker?
I mean, I don't think they're going to be in a duel early in this race. I think Life is Good is going to the lead in here, and I don't think he's going to try to rate things too much up there. And I just think Flightline's probably going to sit somewhere just off of him in the early stages until Pratt decides when he wants to go take that horse on. If it's too early and Life is Good puts up a good fight, maybe it does set the race up for somebody else, Dan. We'll see.
Thus far, no one has put up a fight when Flightline has come calling. Life is Good might be the best horse that Flightline has faced, at least a horse that's been ahead of him. Very few have been ahead of him at any point of his races. Taba goes out for trainer Bob Baffert. Remember, he won the Santa Anita Derby in only his second lifetime start. That's saying something. And he went into the Kentucky Derby, and he was bet down to 5-1 in only his third start. But there's a reason few, if any, of those horses ever win. It's just a lack of experience, and it didn't help that the horse had a bad trip. They gave him plenty of time after that race. He ran well in the Haskell, and he ran well in his final prep. This race, the Pennsylvania Derby, Mike Smith gave him a very nice ride. He broke sharp. He saved ground in behind the leaders. He got out, and he gets the better of two next out winners and a couple of nice ones in Zandon and Cyberknife.
Yeah, just like the way he finishes this race off more than anything else, Dan. He got a good trip in here, but once he came forward in the stretch, he didn't have any trouble putting these horses away, and he just goes on with it to the end here, just under a strong hand ride. I really like the way he finished it off. Another big step forward for him. I think the mile and a quarter is going to be okay as time goes on. Listen, it's not an easy race with the two good older horses to his outside, but this is a good 3-year-old.
And it's quite possible we have yet to see his best race after only 5 lifetime starts. Boy, horse racing fans are hard to please. Life is Good's won his last 2 races, both prestigious Grade 1s, one the Whitney, the other the Woodward, and they were met with resounding raspberries from the social media crew. Let's watch the Woodward last time out over a sloppy track. Irad Ortiz tried to rate this horse a little bit on the lead. He's so fast, and maybe that's not the best way to ride him. Maybe you just want to send him and let him hear his feet rattle. There was an audible gasp when the long shot law professor came to him on the turn, but Life is Good righted the ship, and he got it done. Yet another graded stakes race, and he might not be at his best on wet going.
Yeah, true enough. The wet track, the rating tactics early, those could have been viable excuses. Listen, it's not like the race was close at the end either. I know it didn't come back with a figure. I don't know what everybody got so excited about. There was never a point where it looked like he was going to lose. I don't know. As you know, Dan, I'm his biggest fan. I think he's a super talented horse. He's wicked fast. I thought his Whitney win 2-back was extremely underrated. And I actually think he's a dangerous horse in here. What you have to concern yourself with is the Dubai World Cup, because that was the only time they tried to get 10 furlongs out of him, and he clearly didn't see it out.
Kind of odd that Happy Saver's last win came over a year and a half ago. He won the Jockey Club Gold Cup as a 3-year-old in 2020. He's run so well in many high-profile races. He just seems to find 1 or 2 better. I guess he has a puncher's chance in a race where the pace is fast. He does have the tactical speed to adapt to any kind of pace scenario. Thoughts last time out on the Lucas Classic, it was kind of subpar for Happy Saver.
I thought it was a subpar performance, but I'd be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for that race, because I thought his races 2 and 3 back were both good. I mean, second best to Life is Good, second best to Flightline. They were both good performances. I think it's really saying something though about the quality in this field, Dan, when horses like Happy Saver and Hot Rod Charlie are sort of relegated to fringe contenders. These are two really good horses.
The word great is overused in most sports. I'm not sure it is with Flightline's first 5 starts because each one of them has been absolutely special. And I know he's only run twice this year, but winning the Met Mile off the layoff the way he did, and then coming back to do this, you don't do this in your first start going 1.25 miles, the Pacific Classic, where he opened up 10 lengths on the field in a blink of an eye, starting at about the 4.5 furlong pole, and then he just keeps on going. He finishes his final quarter in this race in 24 and change, and he earned a 126 Beyer speed figure. It's an awe-inspiring race.
It really is. And even the race 2 starts back, which I guess you could say was, the first test. Not that it was a great Met Mile, but even in that race, Danny showed that he could overcome at least a little adversity. It's not like he got a perfect trip in there, but he still won it handily and fast time. And you start taking these races apart. It's just one dominant performance after another. And I think every time you watch him take the track, he's as advertised. There's no letdown with this horse.
Hot Rod Charlie's earned over $5.5 million in his career. He's been a good horse for a long time. A lot of people forget he was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile over this track back in 2020. And he is coming off a game win in the Lucas Classic where he held off the 3-year-old Rich Strike. His game, though, is that he likes to be close to the pace. And I don't believe he's as fast as either Life is Good and Flightline. If he can settle in third into a stalking position, that could be a great spot if a duel ensues. Thoughts about Hot Rod Charlie if the pace is hot and he's got to chase?
I think it works against him. I think he is a horse who's at his best when he can be involved early. And I don't see him really being involved early in this race with Life is Good to his inside. That being said, Hot Rod Charlie, he's a really good horse and he's just so game. There's never any relenting from this horse in the stretch. Even the races that he doesn't win, there's never a point in the stretch where he gives up. He keeps coming.
Despite losing the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness, both with good runner-up efforts, I think the consensus thought after the Preakness was that Epicenter was still the best 3-year-old in the country, and he vied for Horse of the Meet honors at Saratoga with 3-year-old Philly Nest by virtue of his wins in both the Jim Dandy and this race, the Travers, by far a career best performance with a 112 Beyer speed figure. And Joel Rosario found a really nice spot, tracking the pace in the pocket. He made a nice surge on the turn to get alongside Haskell winner Cyberknife, and he put Cyberknife in his place the final 1/8 of a mile. So we learned here he can run a fast race. He does like 1.25 miles. He does have tactical speed. It's just kind of a shame for Epicenter backers. He's facing a horse like Flightline.
Yeah, he's going to do it in a race that's also going to be run at a much faster pace. And so if they're going to go for that kind of trip they got in the Travers last time, it's going to be a little bit of a different story. Clearly, this horse upped his game, though, over the summer at Saratoga. He was good earlier in the year. He got better in his last 2 starts at Saratoga. And he comes into this off of just an absolute dominant performance, going 1.25 miles. He's a dangerous horse, Dan, but this is a really, really tough race.
How good is Flightline? Olympiad has won 6 of his last 7 starts, and he's kind of an afterthought in this race at 10-1 for Bill Mott and Junior Alvarado, despite the fact that he won the Stephen Foster 3-back and he won the Jockey Club Gold Cup last time out, going 1.25 miles. And talk about reasonable paces. Olympiad got right up close to a 1/2 mile in 49 3, and then was just too good for American Revolution. It was kind of a carbon copy of the Stephen Foster where they ran 1-2.
Yeah, it was. He ran it was a nice rebound effort here for Olympiad. A better trip in this race, but he's never letting American Revolution get into this race. He's much the best at the end. Mott has done just a great job with this horse, bringing him along slowly. I think the one thing you have to concern yourself with, Dan, is they stepped him up for the first real test, and I'll say real test too back in the Whitney. He was exposed a little bit. That pace was fast. He couldn't cope with it. He got very tired.
Kentucky Derby winner Rich Strike took advantage of a big pace and a beautiful trip to pull off the upset on the first Saturday in May at 80-1. And he showed his fondness for Churchill Downs and perhaps a return to form when he just missed behind Hot Rod Charlie last time out in the Lucas Classic. I think we know what the plan's going to be here. They're going to drop back, try to save as much ground in last, and hope this pace is electric.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to try to do the same thing they did back on the first Saturday in May and see if it works out. Obviously, this is just a way tougher race. He's run fine in his two most recent starts, Dan, but I don't think he's improved all that much. Good effort last time. He's gonna have to do better than that.
Let's take a look at our top selections for the Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Classic. Flightline is simply the horse to beat. I don't want to have too much money, if any, in against him, but I do think that Epicenter deserves a notation. This horse has had a tremendous year. His 112 buyer last time out was very good, and it's not like he can't adapt to the pace. They go fast. He runs the race like he did in the Derby and Preakness. He'll be running at him late, but boy, Flightline, we're expecting something special, and I'm kind of hoping for it.
Yeah, me too. I ultimately settled on him, Dan. I thought long and hard about picking against him in this race because I do think it's the toughest race for him so far. There's some good horses in here. I ultimately couldn't do it. I put him on top. Depending on how much Life is Good drifts, if he drifts at all, I'll be very tempted to try him in here.
We'll see if Life is Good can try to take them gate to wire, and we'll see if Flightline is once again as advertised. He's been sensational thus far. 4-2-1-6 for Mike. We'll see what Epicenter does against the older horses. 6-4-1-7 for me. It's the Breeders' Cup Classic, the main event on a 2-day Breeders' Cup extravaganza at Keeneland. Best of luck.